All right, everyone, welcome to another episode of O365Eh. In this episode, we're going to be recapping Microsoft Ignite 2020, and we're going to go around to each one of us, and we're going to talk about our top five feature announcements that sort of we're excited about. There may be a little bit of overlap because we like the same ones, I guess, on a couple of them. But Dino, why don't you start us off?
Okay, for sure. So I am completely breaking out of my comfort zone, and full disclosure, I'm not a developer, but my first two are into the whole new development and Power Apps and whatnot. So the first one is the new Power Apps for Teams, and so this was announced, and they did a preview, and there's some cool demos that you probably saw in Microsoft Mechanics. But the crux of this is that you can take Power Apps and embed it right into Teams, and without having to leave Teams, design a very simple app or even a complex one using their designer. So I went away, took that, and built a little simple app to track podcasts. And built a little data source and published it within Teams, and felt pretty proud of myself for doing it. But it just opened my eyes to how much the power of becoming that citizen developer. So that's going to be something I'm going to continue to look at in the horizon. So that was my number one. Following along in that theme was the meeting extensibility. So the ability for developers to take the Teams meeting app experience and add customizations to it. So imagine having a new pane appear in a meeting that lets you take polls or do stuff with the roster, content, permissions, that type of thing. Just like a side panel where you can do a bunch of different things. So I'm looking forward to that. This is announced, and Microsoft's mentioned that at launch they have more than 20 partners signed up. So hopefully we'll get to see some of that new experience, and maybe we'll even have a dedicated O365A podcast to look at some of the vendors and what they're doing in that space. Third for me was the new meeting recap that was announced. So again, in the meeting theme, imagine you're done a meeting, and then you can go back into the meeting, and all of the elements of the meeting, including the transcripts, the recording, who accepted the meeting, who actually showed up to a meeting, are now captured in the meeting recap. And I think this is really super powerful, because you're often going back to your Outlook calendar invite to see who accepted, and you're jumping between apps. And I really like this because now you can do all this from Teams. And sometimes you just want to see, well, we had 10 people, we invited 10 people, only 3 people accepted, or everybody accepted, but maybe 5 showed up. So all of that information is captured there, viewable, the chat transcript, the recording, all of that thing. So I also believe that they're going to publish those details in the meeting event in your Outlook calendar as well, which will be fantastic. Fourth up for me was search in Teams, or search across Office 365, all the products in general. So I believe they're going to just improve the whole search experience in Teams, where you'll be able to look across all your meetings, your chats, anything that you've done in Teams. And this has been sort of an ongoing process. Initially, the search wasn't very good in Teams, and now they've started enhancing it. But I believe we're going to start seeing the desktop search, functionality where you can actually look into some of the Teams content. So you can, right from your desktop, when you do a search, similar like you can do today, you can find content within Sharepoint. You'll be able to reach out and see, content into Teams. And lastly, was the announcement about Microsoft Teams panels. So this is kind of curious, and that this will be that Microsoft's working with partners like Crestron and Yealink to develop panels that sit outside of a room. We're not doing much on-prem meetings these days, but once we get back beyond this COVID situation, we get back into the office. It'll be neat to see these devices where you'll be able to book meeting rooms using a panel that's modeled after the Teams experience. And they did a demo on this, and it was neat because what I liked about it was if the meeting you just walk up to a meeting room, and if it happens to be busy, you could from that panel look for availability for any other panel in close proximity, and that's something that's a bit of a useful feature. It's not something you see on a lot of common panels that are deployed today. So I like that. It even drew you a map of the building, so you could figure out how to get to some of these meeting rooms, and that's always a challenge too. So those were my top 5, and with that, I'm going to pass it over to Michael.
Oh, thanks, Dino. Yeah, I think my top 5 is really around the theme of features that have been around in Teams for quite some time, and kind of adding on to that. So my first one is Teams recordings, meeting recordings, moving to OneDrive and SharePoint for storage. So Stream is not going away. Stream's still around. But Stream is going to be more focusing on the user experience and the rendering of the media files. But the actual content now is going to be stored like a document in your OneDrive and SharePoint. So that's going to allow you to do e-discovery, retention, data loss prevention, all those features that were missing when it was in the Stream and we were waiting for those APIs. But now also things like now that we're treating recordings just like a file, now we can share with external parties. So that was a big issue when we were recording in your home tenant, and you had guests and they couldn't access a file. So you were downloading it from Stream, putting it in OneDrive, and then sharing it out. Now this is all going to be seamless. So I think that's a huge item. And coming in October, you'll be able to test this out. So using a Teams meeting policy, you could change the storage location, put it to OneDrive, and start to test it. Eventually, the ability to keep it in the Stream will go away. I think first quarter of 2021. So we'll be able to kind of test it. Start getting new recordings, being able to use that new location, and eventually the Stream storage location will go away next year. The next item, kind of back to grassroots, is the Office servers. So, SharePoint server, Skype for Business server, Exchange server. The next version of the on-premises services is going to be subscription-based. So after 2019, we're talking about, there isn't really a 2021 version or whatever it's going to be, but in 2021, it's going to be a subscription model. So we'll see how enterprises that aren't ready for the cloud take that, and how that shift in pricing model and renewals go from there. So that was a big one that was kind of slipped in. But yeah, again, coming from that Skype for Business server world and Link server world, it's interesting to see the evolution going into the subscription model. Kind of going to direct routing. Some big announcements here is in first half of 2021, we're going to have support for SIP endpoints to register. So being able to reuse, Cisco phones or Avaya phones, or even, VBX phones without using that kind of Skype profile, being able to register to the online service to use for endpoints. It's going to be core calling features, nothing crazy, but again, being able to use those in lobby areas and elevators and stuff like that. Also with that direct routing announcement was Survivable branch appliance. So think again back to the Skype for Business days of some kind of compute tied to a session border controller, being able to be leveraged when the services go down. So your end users lose their internet, they're able to route their calls through local breakouts for telephony. So that'll be interesting to see how that evolves, and when they release the preview for that, and hopefully that's coming into at least preview before the end of the year. Kind of along with what Dina was saying, so there was some new devices announced. So there was the panels. There was also intelligent speakers. So these are devices that can sit in the meeting space and really indicate who's speaking within the room, so that if you're external, who is talking. Also with transcriptions, being able to kind of have the person that was saying those items while in the transcription, instead of meeting room X was saying this. And so the panels are coming from Yealink and Crestron. The intelligent speakers, I think, are first coming from Yealink and EPOS. And also the 85-inch Surface Hub is coming in, I think, January 2021. So that's another refresh of a device. So we'll see how it is to move an 85-inch Surface Hub on the cart. That should be pretty interesting. One thing with devices is Microsoft announced that they're getting into the device as a service game. So it'll be interesting to see how that evolves. Of course, it's going to be first in the US, probably expanding into Canada and then going from there. So we'll see how the partner ecosystem and that kind of collide, and how that, obviously it's going to benefit the end users and the customers, but it'll be interesting to see how the competitive landscape adjusts with that, Microsoft stepping into that. And then a little bit, maybe a little bit different than voice and meetings is the home site app. So like Dino was saying, the extensibility of Teams is pretty core to the product. And, I'm always building out, like the Get Started app where you have the learning pathways tied in, and build maybe a FAQ bot. And so the home site app is basically getting the full kind of SharePoint page experience within the Teams client. So the navigation and kind of all the nuances of a full modern SharePoint site. So I can't wait to be able to tie into that. I hope it's not just for the news sites for SharePoint, but any kind of SharePoint site being able to render with full header and navigation and footer. So that was my top 5. Maybe I'll throw it over to Hab to talk about his.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. So from my perspective, I think my first one would be the like the new meeting experiences to like improve collaboration. So like there's new together mode scenes, right? There'll obviously be a default one, but then there's they showed one where there's people sitting at a table across from each other, or beside each other, I should say, and then some custom layouts where before the meeting starts, the presenter can build up how the content is showed within the meeting before the meeting experiences. So like picture, taking yourself and transposing it over a PowerPoint, right? So, some of the things that you can do currently now with like OBS Studio and NDI, as Michael mentioned off call beforehand. And basically what it's doing is it's just using the AI to mash in a combination of background blur and together mode to build this new layout experience. So I thought that was pretty interesting. The next one would be, some of the new capabilities coming to Teams. As Michael and Dina mentioned, the new search experience, the home site, I think was pretty interesting. The new one there where it's like being able to create tasks and chats, to create tasks from chats and channels. So you can start building that, task list, or having things come out of certain, or actions out of certain conversations, right? And then I think as Dino mentioned as well, like improved stream playback, some enhanced analytics, and the improved transcription. That would be really good as well, I thought. And then I think the 3 of us, or 4 of us, the videos recordings would be stored in SharePoint and OneDrive. I think Michael went into that a little bit in detail. There's been a lot of requests from my clients to have the ability for external sharing. And so this provides that capability among the other compliance things that you can do with it now as opposed to before. So that was really interesting. And then these 2 were really kind of cool. I'd like to, I'm waiting to see sort of how it can be applied within a business. So the one would be the insights and well-being, having the My Analytics or the workplace analytics. Yeah, a little meditation, Kurt. Coming into Microsoft Teams, and then, individuals such as like managers or leaders get some individual insights and suggested actions, to sort of create like a well-being, having the ability to create like a virtual commute to give yourself some time to, prepare for the day, and then integrate with some apps like Headspace, right, for mindfulness and potential, emotional check-ins, right? And then lastly was the Cortana enhancements coming to Teams. So there's the voice assist. I think they talked about as well, was it's just like a new type of dedicated device specifically for like sending chats or joining meetings or making calls. So I think it's going to be coming out to the US first in English, and then English in Australia and Canada and the UK and India shortly after that. So that'll be a bit interesting there. One thing that I thought was really cool too is to see is the daily briefing email coming in in the morning, so that you can sort of get prepared for your day. I know that I use some other apps within Teams right now that provide that same type of functionality. So it'll be interesting that you'll be able to pull that, and maybe even use Flow or what have you to pull that directly into Teams, so you don't need to get into Outlook. So those are sort of my top 5 right there. Kurt, what about yours?
Thanks, Habib. So like you guys, for me, the number one thing that I was just most excited about was the ability to store a Teams recording in OneDrive and SharePoint. And that's solely just to address the pain of externally sharing a meeting recording. And right now, it's, in my opinion, one of the biggest pain points of Microsoft Teams, in that you have this wonderful meeting with someone outside your organization and they can't access the meeting recordings. So this should solve that. And like Michael said, it's a really good move in terms of now you can treat the Teams meeting like any other data in OneDrive and use all the features for like data retention and all the other security and compliance features. So I think that's a very good move and pretty exciting. Next up, probably boring for a lot of people, but there's a new migration API that was announced for Teams. And why this is really important is it's been a big pain point for some organizations, especially ones undergoing mergers and acquisitions, just not being able to migrate Teams content into Teams in a way that preserved the content. And specifically, there was no way when you created a new team, a channel, or a channel message to set the creation date and the timestamp. And so in almost any migration scenario, either Teams tenant to tenant or from a third-party system into Teams, it was a really challenging experience without being able to set the proper creation and timestamp on all this content. So the new API, it's in public preview. It's announced as a third-party platform migration into Teams. It's a graph API. So Microsoft is targeting, migration from other collaboration platforms like Slack into Teams. It'll be really interesting to see if migration providers, third-party providers, ISVs, actually just use this to make the whole Teams tenant-to-tenant migration experience better. So that's great, and looking forward to that evolving. Sticking with Teams, we sort of touched upon some of the meeting improvements. There's one called custom layouts, which basically allow you to overlay your video over a custom PowerPoint slide, which doesn't sound like much, but I think it gives a much more immersive experience putting this custom background behind you as you talk to a certain set of content, and just makes the whole meeting experience better. And my last two are around the whole security and data loss prevention area. There's an announcement made which basically extends the current DLP, data loss prevention capabilities, to Microsoft Cloud App Security, and that's in public preview. And what this really enables customers to do is use those existing DLP policies and extend them to not only Microsoft applications, but other third-party cloud applications that are visible through Cloud App Security. And that's really cool, because that now, as an organization trying to, beef up security and put DLP policies in effect, you can just define them in one place, and then it applies right across all your applications. So I thought that was pretty significant. And also on the security theme, advanced threat protection. This is more a big rebranding exercise, but it's sort of important to note because I'm not going to go through the whole rebranding. There's quite a few of them, but net, basically advanced threat protection is now getting completely rebranded to Microsoft 365 Defender. And there's a bunch of specific products under that, under the ATP brand names, which are just getting renamed to Defender. And then also Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. This provided protection to the endpoint device, and it's now available for all major platforms. And they announced general availability for the protection of Android devices and a preview for iOS devices. So again, this is just feeding into the whole, security for all your apps, all your devices, which in this whole work from home environment we're all, working in. I think these are really important for enterprises to be able to really get a handle on all the devices and all the applications that their workforce has. So that was about it for me. There was a slew of announcements. I think we all struggled to get through them all and haven't even fully digested it yet. But anything else, Habib or Michael or Dino, that sort of like stuck out for you in terms of announcements at Ignite?
I have a non-Ignite announcement is the removal of requiring advanced communication SKU for contact center and compliance recording. That's a big change because that SKU just came out at the beginning of August, and those that were working with third parties to get compliance recording, sometimes that SKU was more expensive than the third party service to provide that. So it was great to see that those items have now the access to the graph APIs that are required for that functionality are no longer in that additional SKU.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I mean, there's just so much, and we're still, like Kurt said, that we're still trying to catch up. And really, those are just, I guess, the more of the highlights of just the M365. I know Curtis mentioned, some of the ones on the security and compliance side of things, but there's definitely so much more that was announced. So I'll be including a few different links to the tech communities and some other locations. So that's just a central place to capture those announcements if you want to look into it a bit further. I think it's a great top 20, I guess, but some overlapping ones. But thanks everyone for listening in, and we'll catch you on our next episode.
Great, thanks.
See you, everybody.